The impossible assignment. The holographic display in the Galactic Defense Academy's war room cast an eerie blue glow across the faces of the assembled commanders. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez stood at attention, her dark eyes fixed on the rotating image of Kronos 9, the Zephyrian Empire's most heavily fortified world. Around the circular table sat representatives from 12 different species, each one a master strategist in their own right. General Thaxim, a towering crystalline whose body resembled living diamond, gestured toward the hologram with one of his razor-sharp appendages. "The Zephyrians have held this world for 3 centuries," he began, his voice resonating like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Their psychic network creates an impenetrable early warning system. Any approaching force is detected and eliminated long before reaching orbital distance." Admiral Yundar, a slug-like molluscoid whose brain case pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, added her analysis. "Our computational models have run 17 million tactical scenarios. Each assault pattern results in complete annihilation of attacking forces. The fortress is mathematically impregnable." Maya shifted slightly, her human curiosity piqued by the impossible nature of the challenge. She had spent 3 years at the Academy, consistently surprising her instructors with unconventional solutions that somehow worked, despite violating established military doctrine. Her fellow cadets from other species often called her methods chaotic and illogical, but they couldn't argue with her results. Commander Veltar, an insectoid Mantarian whose compound eyes could process multiple tactical displays simultaneously, turned his attention to Maya. "This is why we need you, Lieutenant Rodriguez. Your species has demonstrated an unusual capacity for unpredictable thinking." "Unpredictable is putting it kindly," muttered General Thaxim, though not unkindly. "In your simulation exercises, you've consistently achieved mission objectives through methods that our computers classify as impossible." Maya stepped forward, studying the fortress world more closely. Kronos 9 was a nightmarish vision of military engineering. Floating defense platforms, energy shields that could withstand stellar bombardment, and a surface covered in weapon emplacements that could turn the entire planet into a gigantic gun. The Zephyrians themselves were a hive mind species, their collective consciousness allowing for perfect coordination and instant communication across vast distances. "The mission is simple in concept," Admiral Yundar continued, her brain case flickering with complex patterns. "Infiltrate Kronos 9. Reach the Central Command Nexus and plant a quantum virus that will disrupt their psychic network long enough for our main fleet to assault their primary worlds." "Simple in concept," General Thaxim agreed. "Impossible in execution. Our best infiltration specialists have analyzed every approach. The Zephyrian psychic web detects intent, emotion, and consciousness itself. They can sense a single enemy thought from light years away." Maya nodded slowly, processing the information. The other commanders watched her carefully, knowing that human expressions often preceded radical tactical innovations. She had that look, the same one she'd worn before suggesting they use solar flares as camouflage for fleet movements, or when she'd proposed turning asteroid fields into kinetic bombardment weapons. "What's my survival probability?" Maya asked, though her tone suggested she was more curious than concerned. Commander Veltar's mandibles clicked nervously. "According to our calculations, accounting for every variable we can identify, 2%. The room fell silent. A 2% survival chance was essentially a death sentence, a statistical anomaly that allowed for the possibility of unknown factors, but held no realistic hope for success. Most species would consider such odds an insult, a waste of life with no meaningful chance of achieving the objective. Maya's face broke into a wide grin that made several commanders unconsciously step backward. Humans, they had learned, were most dangerous when they appeared happy about terrible news. "Only 2%, she said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "That's fantastic." The alien commanders exchanged bewildered glances. General Thaxim's crystalline form shifted colors, indicating confusion. "Lieutenant, I believe you misunderstood. 2% means you have virtually no chance of survival." "No, sir, I understood perfectly," Maya replied. her grin widening. If I only have a 2% chance of surviving, that means I have a 98% chance to do something completely insane and still have nothing left to lose. Those are incredible odds for creative problem solving. Admiral Yundar's bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly, a sign of deep concern among her species. Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is not a simulation. This is a real mission with real consequences. Your life would be forfeit. Maya shrugged with casual indifference that unnerved the seasoned commanders. Admiral, with respect, my life is forfeit the moment I accept this mission regardless of the odds. But if I'm going to die anyway, I might as well make it count. And 98% freedom to improvise? That's more creative license than any human could ask for. Commander Veltar's compound eyes focused intently on Maya. Explain your thinking, Lieutenant. Maya moved to the holographic display, her hands dancing through the three-dimensional image as she spoke. Every analysis you've shown me assumes conventional military tactics, stealth approaches, coordinated assaults, logical infiltration methods. But the Zephyrians expect logic. Their hive mind thinks in patterns, anticipates standard responses. She paused, manipulating the display to show the fortress's defensive grid. But what if we don't give them a standard response? What if we give them something so chaotic, so fundamentally unpredictable, that their collective consciousness can't process it? General Thaxim's form shifted through several color spectrums before settling on a skeptical amber. The Zephyrian psychic network has absorbed the thoughts and tactics of conquered species for millennia. There is no strategy they haven't encountered. That's exactly my point, Maya said, her excitement building. They've encountered every logical strategy, but humans aren't particularly logical. We're creative, adaptable, and fundamentally chaotic. Our decision-making processes involve intuition, emotion, and random inspiration. How do you predict true randomness? She turned to face the assembled commanders, her expression serious despite her enthusiasm. Give me this mission and I'll show you what 98% looks like. I'll either succeed in the most spectacular way possible, or fail so creatively that it gives our tacticians new ideas for the next attempt. The commanders deliberated in their various languages and communication methods for several minutes. Crystalline harmonics mixed with bioluminescent patterns and ultrasonic clicks as they weighed the impossible decision. Finally, General Thaxim spoke for the group. Lieutenant Rodriguez, you understand that this mission has no backup plan, no extraction protocol, and no guarantee of support once you reach Kronos 9. Maya nodded. Understood, sir. You also understand that if you succeed, you'll be stranded on the most heavily defended world in Zephyrian space with no means of escape? Understood, sir. And you're volunteering for this assignment knowing that mathematical analysis gives you effectively no chance of survival? Maya's grin returned bright and fierce. Sir, I'm not volunteering despite the odds. I'm volunteering because of them. When humans have nothing left to lose, that's when we become most dangerous. Admiral Yundar's brain case pulsed with what Maya had learned to recognize as resignation, mixed with admiration. Very well, Lieutenant. The mission is yours. You'll depart in 72 hours aboard the stealth ship Shadow of Andromeda. Captain Zekhan will get you as close to Kronos 9 as possible without triggering their detection grid. As the meeting dissolved and commanders filed out, Commander Veltar approached Maya. Lieutenant, may I ask what you plan to do with that 98%? Maya looked back at the holographic fortress, her mind already spinning with possibilities that would have horrified any sane military planner. Commander, I'm going to do something so unexpected, so completely contrary to established tactical doctrine, that the Zephyrians won't know how to respond until it's too late. And what exactly would that be? Maya's smile became predatory. I'm going to tell them the truth. The infiltration gambit. The stealth ship, Shadow of Andromeda, drifted through the void like a whisper made of darkness and metal. Captain Zekhan, a reptilian saurian whose scales could shift color to match his emotional state, watched his instruments with growing anxiety. They were now only 6 hours from Kronos 9's outer detection perimeter, deeper in Zephyrian space than any galactic defense ship had ever traveled. Lieutenant Rodriguez, he hissed, his scales flickering between nervous yellow and worried green. My sensors are detecting massive psychic emanations from the fortress world. The Zephyrian collective consciousness is so powerful here that it's creating gravitational distortions in space-time itself. Maya floated in the ship's zero-gravity observation deck, studying the approaching planet through the reinforced viewport. Kronos 9 hung before them like a malevolent jewel, its surface crawling with defensive installations and orbital platforms. Energy barriers shimmered around the world like deadly aurora, and the space around it swarmed with patrol ships moving in perfect synchronization. "Captain, how close can you get me without triggering their detection grid?" Maya asked, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. Captain Zekhan consulted his instruments, his scales shifting to a deep blue that indicated intense concentration. Conventional wisdom suggests maintaining at least 50 astronomical units from their outer perimeter. Any closer and their psychic sensors will detect our presence. What about unconventional wisdom? The captain's scales rippled with confused orange patterns. "I'm not certain I understand, Lieutenant." Maya pushed off from the viewport and glided over to the navigation console. "Captain, every ship that's tried to approach Kronos 9 has followed logical stealth protocols. They've used predictable routes, standard emission suppression, and conventional hiding techniques. The Zephyrians expect that." She began pulling up star charts and tactical displays, her fingers dancing across the holographic interfaces. What if we do something completely different? What if we approach from the most obvious vector using the most detectable methods possible? Captain Zekhan's scales flashed warning red. "Lieutenant, that would be suicide. They would detect us immediately and destroy the ship before we could deploy you." "Exactly," Maya said with that unsettling human smile that made alien species instinctively nervous. "They would detect a normal ship with normal intentions. But what if our intentions aren't normal? What if we're not trying to hide at all?" She manipulated the display to show a direct course to Kronos 9, straight through the heart of their defensive perimeter. "Captain, I need you to do something that violates every principle of stealth warfare. I need you to broadcast our approach, on all frequencies, maximum power, directly toward their psychic detection grid." Captain Zekhan's scales cycled through the entire spectrum of his species' emotional range, before settling on a sickly gray that indicated complete bewilderment. "Lieutenant, you're asking me to announce our presence to the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. That's not strategy, that's assisted suicide." Maya's expression grew serious. "Captain, the Zephyrian hive mind operates on pattern recognition. They predict threats based on accumulated experience and logical analysis. Every ship that's ever approached their space has tried to sneak in quietly. Their entire defensive doctrine is built around detecting and eliminating hidden threats." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "But what happens when a threat doesn't try to hide? What happens when someone approaches openly, voluntarily announcing their presence and intentions? The Zephyrian collective has no behavioral pattern for that scenario." Captain Zekhan stared at her for a long moment, his scales gradually shifting to a thoughtful purple. "You're suggesting that complete transparency will achieve what total stealth could not. I am suggesting that sometimes the best way to be invisible is to be completely visible in a way that doesn't make sense," Maya replied. "The human brain processes information differently than the Zephyrian collective consciousness. We're used to managing contradiction, paradox, and apparent nonsense. They're not." The captain considered this, his tactical training warring with his survival instincts. Finally, his scales settled into determined silver. "Lieutenant, this is either the most brilliant strategy I've ever encountered, or the most elaborate suicide I've ever participated in." "Probably both," Maya admitted cheerfully. "But that's what makes it fun." 6 hours later, the shadow of Andromeda began broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. Maya had recorded a message that was being transmitted directly toward Kronos 9's command center in 17 different languages, including standard Zephyrian collective speak. "Attention, Kronos 9 Defense Command." Her voice rang across the void. "This is Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez of the Galactic Defense Fleet. I am approaching your world alone and unarmed to deliver an important message to your collective consciousness. I am not attempting stealth or deception, My ship will arrive at your outer perimeter in 3 hours and 27 minutes. Please do not shoot until you've heard what I have to say. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Zephyrian patrol ships converged on their position from every direction, energy weapons charging and targeting systems locked onto the tiny stealth vessel. But they didn't fire. They're confused, Captain Zekhan reported, his instruments barely able to process the chaos of psychic emanations coming from the Zephyrian fleet. Their collective consciousness is experiencing something I've never seen before. It's like they're having an argument with themselves. Maya nodded knowingly. The hive mind is trying to categorize me as a threat, but I don't fit any of their threat profiles. A single human openly announcing her presence, asking not to be shot until they hear her message. They have no precedent for this behavior. As they approached the defensive perimeter, hundreds of Zephyrian ships surrounded them, but none opened fire. Maya could see the confusion in their formation patterns. Normally perfect coordination disrupted by an encounter with something truly unpredictable. "Lieutenant," Captain Zekhan whispered, "they're scanning us with every sensor array they possess, but they're not targeting us for destruction. They're trying to understand what you are." Maya activated the ship's external communication array and broadcast another message. "Kronos 9 Command. I know you're scanning my ship and analyzing my intentions. You won't find any hidden weapons or secret plans because there aren't any. I'm exactly what I appear to be. A human who wants to talk to your collective consciousness about something important. May I approach your world?" The response came in the form of a single Zephyrian dreadnought, larger than most space stations, positioning itself directly in their path. Its psychic emanations were so powerful that they created visible distortions in space around the massive vessel. "This is Nexus Prime of the Kronos Defense Collective." The transmission arrived as pure thought rather than sound. "Your behavioral patterns are anomalous. Explain your intentions before we vaporize your vessel." Maya smiled and activated visual communication, her image appearing on screens across the Zephyrian fleet. "Nexus Prime, my intentions are simple. I want to make you an offer that will change everything." The psychic silence that followed was so complete that Captain Zekhan's instruments registered it as a dead zone in space-time itself. "Finally," Nexus Prime responded. "Proceed to landing Bay 7. You will be escorted under heavy guard to a containment facility where your offer will be evaluated." As the shadow of Andromeda was tractored toward the massive fortress world, Maya began preparing for the next phase of her impossible plan. Captain Zekhan watched her with a mixture of admiration and terror. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "you realize that once you set foot on that world, you'll be completely at their mercy? The collective consciousness will be able to read your thoughts, predict your actions, and counter any strategy you might attempt." Maya checked her equipment one final time, though she carried nothing more threatening than a standard survival kit. "Captain, that's exactly what I'm counting on. The Zephyrians are about to learn something important about human psychology." "What's that?" Maya's grin became almost feral. "We do our best thinking when we're terrified." The Chaos Protocol, the containment chamber deep within Kronos 9's central citadel, hummed with psychic energy so intense it made the air itself shimmer. Maya sat calmly on a simple metal chair in the center of the room, surrounded by a dozen Zephyrian interrogators whose collective consciousness pressed against her mind like a living weight. The walls were lined with crystalline formations that amplified psychic resonance, creating an environment where thoughts themselves became visible as dancing patterns of light. Human designation, Maya Rodriguez. The collective voice spoke through all 12 Zephyrians simultaneously, creating an eerie harmonic that would have driven most species to madness. "Your surface thoughts indicate deception, yet your deep intentions remain shielded by chaotic neural patterns we cannot interpret." Maya nodded, seemingly unbothered by the psychic pressure that was powerful enough to crack stone. "That's because human consciousness doesn't work the way you expect it to. We don't think in straight lines or logical progressions. We jump around, contradict ourselves, and make decisions based on intuition and emotion as much as logic." One of the interrogators stepped forward, its elongated head pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concentration. "You claim to have an offer for our collective. Yet your thoughts reveal no specific proposal, no tactical advantage, no strategic benefit. Instead, we perceive only randomness. Exactly, Maya replied, her smile genuine despite the circumstances. That randomness is my offer. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of psychic amplifiers. The collective consciousness struggled to process this statement, creating feedback loops and contradictory interpretations that manifested as visible distortions in the crystalline walls. Clarify your statement, the collective demanded, its confusion evident in the wavering harmonics of its voice. Maya stood and began pacing, her movements apparently aimless but somehow hypnotic. For 3,000 years, your collective has conquered species after species by reading their thoughts, predicting their strategies, and countering their every move before they can make it. You've absorbed the tactical knowledge of entire civilizations. She paused, turning to face the interrogators directly. But you've never encountered true chaos. You've never faced an enemy whose decisions are based on inspiration, intuition, and random creativity, rather than logical analysis. The lead interrogator's bioluminescence shifted to warning patterns. Chaos is inefficiency. Random behavior leads to failure and defeat. This is mathematical certainty. Is it? Maya asked, her voice taking on a challenging tone. Then why am I standing here in your most secure facility, having penetrated your defenses using methods your collective consciousness couldn't predict or counter? The chamber's psychic field fluctuated as the collective grappled with this paradox. Maya pressed her advantage. I broadcast my approach openly. I announced my intentions. I asked permission to land on your world. According to logical tactical analysis, I should have been destroyed immediately. Yet here I am, because my behavior was so contrary to established patterns that your collective couldn't categorize it as a threat. She began moving again, her path seemingly random, but somehow creating a complex geometric pattern as she walked. The Zephyrian's eyes followed her movements, their collective consciousness trying desperately to find meaning in her actions. Your species has evolved beyond individual thought, Maya continued. You've achieved perfect coordination, instant communication, and flawless tactical integration. But you've also eliminated the one thing that makes consciousness truly powerful: the ability to surprise yourself. The interrogators exchanged rapid psychic pulses before their leader spoke again. Human consciousness is flawed. Individual thought leads to conflict, inefficiency, and strategic weakness. This is why inferior species fall before our collective superiority. Maya laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the psychically charged chamber. Inferior? Your collective has been stalemated by the Galactic Defense Fleet for 50 years. You can't advance because we keep doing things you don't expect. Every time you think you've figured us out, we change the rules. She stopped pacing and fixed, the lead interrogator with an intense stare. That's my offer. I'll teach your collective consciousness how to think like a human. I'll show you how to embrace chaos, accept contradiction, and make decisions based on intuition rather than analysis. The psychic field in the chamber went completely silent, as if the collective consciousness had temporarily shut down to process this impossible proposal. When it returned, its voice carried undertones of deep uncertainty. You offer to teach us? To improve our consciousness with inferior human thinking patterns? Not improve, Maya corrected. Revolutionize. Your collective is like a perfect machine, efficient, predictable, and ultimately limited by its own perfection. But humans are like controlled chaos, inefficient in the short term, but infinitely adaptable in the long term. She resumed her seemingly random movements, and this time, the Zephyrians noticed something disturbing. They couldn't predict where she would step next. Her path was neither random nor planned, but something in between that their analytical minds couldn't grasp. Observe, Maya said, suddenly changing direction in a way that made no tactical sense. You're trying to predict my movements using pattern analysis and behavioral algorithms. But I'm not following a pattern. I'm following inspiration, making choices based on what feels right rather than what makes logical sense. The interrogator's bioluminescent patterns began fluctuating wildly, as they struggled to process her movement pattern. Their collective consciousness was experiencing something it had never encountered before: genuine unpredictability. "This is unsettling," the collective admitted. "Your movement patterns create uncertainty in our predictive matrices. We cannot determine your intentions or destination." Maya stopped in the exact center of the chamber, though she hadn't consciously planned to end up there. That's the power of chaos thinking. I didn't plan to stop here, but something about this position felt right. I can't explain why, and you can't predict it, but it serves my purposes perfectly. She gestured to the crystalline walls around them. Your entire fortress, your whole civilization, is built on the assumption that consciousness can be perfected through collective integration. But what if consciousness isn't meant to be perfect? What if its strength comes from its contradictions and inconsistencies? The lead interrogator stepped closer, its psychic emanations creating visible ripples in the air. "You propose that we intentionally introduce chaos into our collective consciousness? That we deliberately accept inefficiency and contradiction?" "I propose that you learn to dance with uncertainty," Maya replied, "to make decisions based on intuition as well as analysis, to embrace the possibility that sometimes the best choice is the one that doesn't make sense." The collective consciousness fell silent again, but this time Maya could sense something different in the psychic field: curiosity mixed with fear. They were beginning to understand that she wasn't just offering tactical advice, but a fundamental transformation of their entire way of being. What would be the result of such chaos integration? The collective asked hesitantly. Maya's smile became almost predatory. "You'd become unpredictable to your enemies, adaptable to changing circumstances, and capable of solutions that pure logic could never discover. You'd also become uncertain, sometimes inefficient, and occasionally wrong." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "But most importantly, you'd become truly alive instead of just perfectly organized." The psychic field around her began to fluctuate wildly as the collective consciousness grappled with concepts that challenged its most fundamental assumptions. Maya could sense that she had introduced something into their perfect order that they couldn't simply eliminate or ignore: doubt. "The question now," she said quietly, "is whether you're brave enough to learn what chaos feels like from the inside." The 98% solution. The central command nexus of Kronos 9 stretched beyond human comprehension, a crystalline cathedral of pure thought where the collective consciousness of 10 billion Zephyrians merged into a single, overwhelming intelligence. Maya stood on a platform suspended in the center of this psychic maelstrom, her individual human mind somehow maintaining coherence despite being surrounded by the most powerful telepathic field in the known galaxy. "We have reached a decision," the Overmind spoke, its voice carrying the weight of civilizations. "Your proposal intrigues our collective, but we require demonstration. Show us this chaos thinking you claim will revolutionize consciousness itself." Maya nodded, though she was barely visible amid the swirling patterns of psychic energy that filled the vast chamber. Around her, massive crystalline matrices processed the thoughts and experiences of the entire Zephyrian Empire, creating a three-dimensional map of collective knowledge that pulsed with bioluminescent data streams. "Overmind," Maya said, her voice somehow carrying clearly through the psychic interference. "Your collective consciousness has been trying to read my thoughts since I arrived. What have you discovered?" The Overmind's response created visible waves in the crystalline formations around them. Contradiction. Your surface thoughts speak of cooperation and mutual benefit, while your deeper intentions remain fragmented. We detect planning and spontaneity existing simultaneously. Logic and intuition operating in parallel rather than sequence. It is disturbing." Maya smiled, spreading her arms wide as if embracing the chaos around her. "That's exactly right. Human consciousness isn't a single stream of thought. It's multiple streams flowing in different directions at the same time. We can plan and improvise simultaneously, think logically while following hunches, cooperate while maintaining individual identity." She began moving through the chamber, her path weaving between the floating crystalline matrices in a pattern that seemed both purposeful and random. The Overmind tracked her movements, trying desperately to predict her next action, but finding only uncertainty. "Your movement patterns are mathematically impossible," the Overmind observed, its voice carrying undertones of confusion. "You appear to be following 17 different trajectories simultaneously, none of which lead to tactical advantage or strategic position." "That's because I'm not trying to reach a specific destination," Maya replied, continuing her seemingly chaotic dance through the command chamber. "I'm exploring possibilities, letting my intuition guide me toward something I haven't consciously identified yet." As she moved, Maya's thoughts began to affect the crystalline matrices around her. The ordered data streams started to fluctuate, creating new patterns and connections that the Overmind couldn't categorize. The collective consciousness found itself processing concepts it had never encountered before: inspiration, creative breakthrough, intuitive leap. "What are you doing to our systems?" the Overmind demanded, though its voice carried more curiosity than alarm. Maya laughed, the sound creating resonant harmonics in the crystalline structures. "I'm thinking human thoughts in a Zephyrian environment. Your collective consciousness is trying to process my chaotic thought patterns, but it's never encountered anything like them before. You're being forced to create new categories, new ways of understanding reality." She paused near one of the larger crystalline matrices, placing her hand against its surface. Immediately, the entire structure began pulsing with erratic patterns as it tried to process her thoughts. "Watch what happens when chaos meets order." The matrix began displaying impossible configurations, data streams that flowed backward, logical constructs that contradicted themselves, strategic analyses that reached conclusions through non-sequential reasoning. The Overmind's consciousness recoiled from the paradoxes but couldn't stop processing them. "This is..." The Overmind paused, struggling to find words for something beyond its experience. "This is thinking about thinking differently than thinking itself." "Exactly," Maya exclaimed, her excitement causing the entire chamber to resonate with new harmonics. "You've just experienced a human thought pattern, metacognition combined with recursive paradox. We don't just think about problems. We think about how we think about problems, and then we think about that process too." She moved to another matrix, this one displaying the tactical situation of the war between the Zephyrian Empire and the Galactic Defense Fleet. As her thoughts interfaced with the system, the display began showing battle scenarios that violated every principle of military strategy, yet somehow achieved victory through sheer unpredictability. "Observe your own military doctrine," Maya said, gesturing to the swirling tactical displays. "Perfect coordination, flawless communication, logical, progression from analysis to action. It's beautiful, efficient, and completely predictable." The displays shifted, showing engagement after engagement where Zephyrian forces had achieved tactical superiority, only to be defeated by illogical human strategies. Battles won through deliberate confusion, victories achieved by doing exactly the wrong thing at the right moment, strategic objectives accomplished through apparent retreat and surrender. "Your collective consciousness cannot comprehend why these tactics succeed," Maya continued, "because they're not designed to be comprehensible. They're designed to work despite being incomprehensible." The Overmind fell silent for a long moment, its vast intelligence processing implications that challenged its fundamental understanding of reality. When it spoke again, its voice carried a quality Maya had never heard from a Zephyrian before: uncertainty. "If we were to integrate these chaos patterns into our collective consciousness, what would be the result?" Maya's expression became serious. "You would become something unprecedented, a collective consciousness capable of individual thought, a hive mind that embraces contradiction, a perfect order that thrives on chaos. But you would also lose your certainty, your absolute confidence, in logical analysis." She gestured to the command chamber around them. "This entire fortress, your whole empire, is built on the assumption that perfect order leads to perfect victory. Chaos thinking would change that. You might become more powerful, But you'd also become more vulnerable. You'd gain the ability to surprise yourselves, but you'd lose the comfort of always knowing what comes next. The crystalline matrices around them began pulsing in unison as the Overmind considered her words. Finally, it spoke again, its voice, carrying a resolution that surprised Maya with its human-like quality. We have analyzed your proposal from every conceivable angle. Logic suggests that chaos integration is inefficient and dangerous. Mathematical models indicate probable system failure and collective dissolution. Maya nodded, waiting for the inevitable rejection. Therefore, the Overmind continued, we have decided to proceed with immediate implementation. Maya's surprise was so complete that it created a psychic shockwave throughout the chamber. What? You're accepting chaos integration despite all logical arguments against it? The Overmind's response carried what Maya could only describe as amusement. Lieutenant Rodriguez, we have just experienced our first human thought, making a decision that contradicts our own analysis because it feels correct despite being illogical. The chaos integration has already begun. Around them, the crystalline matrices began shifting into new configurations. Their ordered data streams mixing and merging in patterns that created unprecedented possibilities. The collective consciousness of the Zephyrian Empire was learning to embrace uncertainty, and the results were magnificent and terrifying. What happens now? Maya asked, still processing the impossibility of what she had achieved. Now, the Overmind replied, we implement the Rodriguez Protocol across our entire empire. Our collective consciousness will learn to dance with chaos while maintaining the benefits of unity. We will become unpredictable to our enemies while remaining coordinated in our actions. The command chamber began reconfiguring itself around them, crystalline structures flowing like liquid as they adapted to accommodate both order and chaos simultaneously. Maya watched in wonder as the most rigid civilization in the galaxy taught itself to be flexible. And the war? She asked. The war is over, the Overmind said simply. Not through conquest or surrender, but through evolution. Both our species have learned something new about consciousness itself. The Galactic Defense Fleet will be contacted with a proposal for alliance based on mutual exchange of cognitive methodologies. Maya smiled, finally understanding the true scope of what she had accomplished. She hadn't just completed an impossible mission. She had transformed the fundamental nature of consciousness in the galaxy. Overmind, she said. When I started this mission, my commanders calculated a 2% survival probability. They thought I was volunteering for certain death. The Overmind's response resonated through every crystal in the chamber, carrying harmonics of something that might have been laughter. Lieutenant Rodriguez, your commanders made a fundamental error in their calculations. They computed the probability of your survival using conventional parameters, logical tactics, predictable outcomes, standard definitions of success and failure. Maya felt a familiar grin spreading across her face. They didn't account for the 98%. Precisely. They failed to calculate the probability of you achieving something beyond survival, the probability of you changing the nature of reality itself through the application of controlled chaos to ordered systems. The crystalline matrices around them had completed their transformation, now displaying hybrid patterns that combined Zephyrian logical precision with human intuitive chaos. The result was beautiful and strange. Data streams that flowed like music, tactical analyses that incorporated emotional factors, strategic projections that allowed for the impossible. Your species, the Overmind continued, has a saying about making something from nothing. But you have done something far more remarkable. You have made everything from almost nothing. 2% became 100% through the application of pure human audacity. Maya looked around the transformed command chamber, watching as 10 billion Zephyrian minds learned to think new thoughts, to embrace uncertainty while maintaining unity. She had not just survived an impossible mission, she had created a new form of consciousness that neither species could have achieved alone. There's something else, she said, her tone becoming more serious. My people need to know what happened here. They need to understand that sometimes the best way to win isn't to fight the enemy, but to help them become something better. The Overmind considered this, its vast intelligence now enhanced by newfound appreciation for paradox and intuition. A message will be sent to your Galactic Defense Academy, but it will not be a standard military report. It will be something unprecedented, a joint communication from both our species, describing the birth of a new kind of consciousness. As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Zekhan's voice crackled through Maya's communicator. Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is Shadow of Andromeda. I'm detecting massive changes in the Zephyrian fleet formations. They're doing something I've never seen before. Their ships are moving in patterns that seem both coordinated and random simultaneously. Maya activated her communicator, her voice carrying across space to her anxious captain. Zekhan, those aren't attack formations. They're celebration formations. The Zephyrians are learning to dance. What? Lieutenant, I don't understand. Are you saying the mission was successful? Maya looked around the command chamber one more time, watching impossible beauty emerge from the marriage of order and chaos. Captain, the mission was more successful than anyone imagined possible. I came here to plant a virus in their system. Instead, I helped them evolve. She paused, considering how to explain the inexplicable. The war is over, but not through victory or defeat. It's over because both sides have become something new. Prepare for departure. We're going home to help our people understand what consciousness can become when it stops trying to be perfect. As Maya was escorted back to her ship by Zephyrian guards who now moved with slightly chaotic patterns, the Overmind spoke one final time. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, your species will be remembered not as conquerors or defenders, but as teachers of the impossible. You have shown us that consciousness is not meant to be perfected but to be endlessly transformed. Maya smiled as she walked through corridors that now pulsed with hybrid patterns of thought and energy. Overmind, that's the most human thing you've ever said. We are learning quickly. Hours later, as the Shadow of Andromeda departed Kronos 9, Captain Zekhan stared at his instruments in bewilderment. Lieutenant, according to my sensors, that planet is now generating psychic frequencies I've never encountered before. It's like they're thinking in music instead of mathematics. Maya settled into her acceleration couch, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion of the past days. Captain, they're thinking in jazz instead of classical music. They've learned that sometimes the most beautiful harmony comes from controlled improvisation. And our fleet, what do we tell them when we return? Maya closed her eyes, already composing the report that would revolutionize military doctrine across the galaxy. We tell them that sometimes a 2% chance of survival is really a 98% chance to change everything. We tell them that humans don't just survive impossible odds. We use impossible odds to create impossible solutions. She opened her eyes, looking out at the stars that now seemed to twinkle with new possibilities. Most importantly, we tell them that the next time someone calculates our odds of success, they need to remember that human mathematics work differently when applied to impossible situations. Captain Zekhan's scales shifted to confused but admiring purple. How so, Lieutenant? Maya's final smile carried all the satisfaction of a gamble that had paid off beyond anyone's wildest dreams. When humans have nothing left to lose, we discover that we had everything to gain all along. That's not just mathematics, Captain. That's magic. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of an unprecedented transformation back to the Galactic Defense Academy, Maya allowed herself one last thought about the mission that had changed everything. She had been given a 2% chance of survival and had turned it into a 100% chance of revolution. The 98%, it turned out, had been the most valuable part of the equation all along.